What glamorized career is actually a nightmare to work in? Not a job per se, but frequent travel for work. Spending that much time going to and from airports and hotels wears thin after a while. And unless you have extra time, forget about checking out the amazing new city you're in. Say hello to lobby bars, room service, and watching porn. People always think it's so cool that I travel for work, but the reality is I go from airport to hotel to client site to hotel to airport. So much for seeing the world. The movie business is a hard one if you're not an A-list actor. A family member of mine is a production assistant and they work brutal hours until that picture is done. 20-hour days. Being a musician. Not the kind of rock star you're used to seeing, but one of the thousands of faceless professionals who travels, writes tour gigs. The industry is cruel. The work is not steady. You travel and audition and network endlessly. The gig that makes money is not often the music you'd want to play. Everyone is trying to rip you off or underpay you. You don't get to have a lazy night, weekend or holiday. If it isn't the kind of work you want to be doing 24/7, you'll be burned the duck out. At the end of the day, practically nobody outside of your musical colleagues understands or respects your career choices. It can have its rewards, but it's a rough path. Not very glamorized, but owning any sort of restaurant or bar. Countless hours of hard work, and a very small chance of actually making it. Owning any business tends to be far more work than anyone thinks. It's not like you can be Bill Gates and rake in the cash after 5 years. If you are lucky, your business will be doing well enough that you can finally get down to 40 hours a week by then. Till jobs are awful. That's why you get paid to do them. Game design has to be up there. You have so many younger people who grew up with video games wanting to make them, but the ugly truth is that the game industry has a lot of terrible conditions. There is so much crunch time and long workdays, it's almost criminal. It's also not very stable. You have people jumping ship from studio to studio every few years, etc. You should go take a look at the r/Star Wars Battlefront sub. Not a day goes by where some asshat complains about how lazy the devs are and how they and modders could save the game. Necromancer. People think it's all staves, incantations, and resurrected minions, but there are hours and hours of dusty tome work in ancient forgotten libraries. You have to learn dozens of languages to reach the top of the game, and you know what? One day some young cunt with a magic sword and a bunch of self-confidence comes along and stabs you in the soulgem. Bam. It's over. Hey, I didn't ask for you to be in that cave with the enchanted glass armor worth 5k. It has to be airline hosts/hostesses, right? The things those poor people have to deal with. Excuse me, I'm hot. Can we open a window? You're not that hot, you're a 6 at best. EMT. The pay sucks, the hours are long, the equipment's junk, and you are treated like shit by fire, Leos, nurses, the patient's family, ect. Ah, but you save lives. Maybe 1 in 100 calls you get to make a real difference in a sick patient. The other 99 calls are for bullshit complaints and people exploiting the system. Wedding planning. I see this glamorized a lot on television, and it's not as glamorous as people think. Weddings bring out the worst in people, and I'm not just talking about the bridezilla. Oftentimes it's the groom, the parents, the best friends, everyone involved in the wedding. People think weddings are about sparkly pretty things and mason jars. It's really not. You have to have stellar people skills, and by that I mean you have to be able to guide people in the right direction, even when they're in an emotional state. Video game dev. I'm a college student majoring in game development, so I guess I'll just go cry in a corner. Edit. I'm happy with what I have, I don't plan to change my major. Thanks for the constructive feedback though. Best of luck. This is so sad, I love this kind of job. Vet med. People think that you get to play with puppies and kitties all day. It's definitely great, but then you also get to deal with some pretty dumb clients, shit, puke, blood, parvo, angry pets, and the likes. I worked at a clinic for a while and liked it, but there's just more to it than cute critters. And the amount of neglect, or how a large part of the job is putting animals down. It's also trying to sell services and convincing people their pets need preventive care. It's not a fun job. Are you saying my pet needs vaccines? Doctor. 24-hour calls, 8 days straight before a single day off, then another 8 days, patients trying to get drugs, co-workers trying to pawn off all their work, and if for some reason you get sick, you literally live in this hospital, where all the diseases are, you feel like the asshole for taking any time off to get well. Sounds like residency. Just got to get out of that and the hours get better. The music industry is so ducked up, especially in Korea. I think it was a former member of BTS who was talking about his contract and all that, and they're really worked to the ducking bone, to the point that it's actually pretty common for them to pass out on stage or have to be taken to the hospital for exhaustion just from how overworked they are. Idol groups in general are another level of crazy in Japan, Korea, etc., especially the girl groups. Their lives are so carefully manufactured that having a life outside of their image is downright impossible. Not actually a nightmare, but definitely doesn't live up to the hype architecture. Being a chef. So many people I've talked to, and even including myself, once upon a time, think it's like in those Lindt commercials where you're wearing clean whites and slowly pouring sauce into a pristine copper bowl and tasting gorgeously prepared dishes with a face of rapture and delight. Duck no. It's coming in at 5 a.m. to unload heavy boxes in the freezing cold, wearing 4 different layers that have to come off as soon as you step inside because it's goddamn hot in a kitchen. It's memorizing dozens, or hundreds, of menu items, and then still having to come up with things on the fly because everything gets 86'd by the end of the night, if you're busy, and if you're any good at your job, you're always busy. It's a lot of running around and sweating and screaming at people, at being screamed at by people, and doing things that are ducking dangerous and stupid, like pulling pans out of the oven with no gloves because you can't find the 3 that the whole restaurant has to share, or running with knives in your hands because that fish needs to be filleted now, because your options are either do it unsafely, or it won't get done. And it has to get done. It's being on your feet for 14 hours at a time, because there simply isn't much of a minute to run to the latrine, and constantly scrubbing your hands because you might have touched anything at all. It's counting every ounce of gravy left behind in a pot, and figuring out how much more your limited budget or food cost is going to be ducked because someone couldn't be bothered to scrape out a half cup of expensive ass shit. It's low profit margins and time demanding, and there comes a point where you're sick of your own food, because, of course, you do hastily taste everything before you plate it up and send it out for service. It's fighting with the front house staff and back house staff, and a constant game of having to both assert that you have authority and should be respected for your talent and skills, and also imbibing the team with a sense of community, and cleaning out the grease traps with them, rather than sticking it to them only. It's literally having to make the decision to care more about your guests and your plates than yourself, and having to back that decision constantly. And, of course, you have to do all this for a comparatively small pay scale, because only Bobby Flay gets paid like Bobby Flay. Don't get me wrong, I love what I do, and I'm proud of all my years of effort and planning events and cycling menus. But a lot of people think that being a chef is no harder than the Muppets portray it. If you don't love hating yourself, then this is the wrong industry for you. Video game development. Everyone wants to work in it, so there's no pressure on companies to retain employees. They can get away with treating people worse than slaves. Who is still under the delusion that working for a large game developer is a good job? I know a lot of people working at big studios here in Montreal, Ubisoft, Behavior, etc., and they are all very well treated, especially at Ubi. Lawyers. The fun-looking bit from movies/TV is a pretty small fraction of the job. I'd say it's 75% of civil legal work is reading endless amounts of paper, cases, statutes, contracts. So much reading. I heard that being a lawyer is very much like doing homework for a living. Advertising. Mad Men has made it seem like a glamorous job with drinking all day. It's actually incredibly stressful, and you'll be putting in a lot of late hours. Exactly. It was super stressful and everything was always urgent. I'm much happier being back in school. Modeling. One of my coworkers moved away from friends and family to a foreign country to model. He didn't get paid much, developed an eating disorder, and was basically isolated in a country where he didn't speak the language. He finally quit after 4 years and is much happier working a slightly above minimum wage job at a place where all the ladies refer to him as that hot new guy. Maybe not glamorized, but the trades are often lauded as the best non-college job option around. If you're in a union state, maybe, but if you're just a regular dude, you'll probably top out at a respectable but stagnant hourly with mediocre benefits after 4 years or more of barely livable wages doing grunt work. Same here, that's if you get the apprenticeship. Then there's the problems of actually being properly trained on site. I'm still unlicensed 8 years later. Not to mention the hundreds in tools and protective equipment you're just supposed to pull out of your ass. Front office jobs on Wall Street, particularly investment banking. Wolf of Wall Street makes it look like drugs and sex, but what they don't show are the 100-hour work weeks, no days off, and constant burnout. Probably the realest thing about that film is the berating of the entry-level analysts. Every job there is. Everything you do pisses everyone off, you get paid McDonald's wages to do it, and you're never happy with any of your work because you're always in a mad rush to shit it out before deadline. I often see IT glamorized on the internet. But the amount of uninformed people you have to deal with is astonishing, and it gets old really fast. Redditors seem to set it pretty straight to me. Software. Everyone looks at software engineering and technology careers are a good job, but sometimes it's hell on earth and there's little to no room to screwing up. Like YouTube was shut down over a small error, but because it was a few hours everyone went apeshit. When something like YouTube goes down, you can't blame a software engineer, that is a process problem. Not some guy/girl ducking up. It's usually a perfect storm of several things going wrong at the exact same time. Working in a nature preserve. Everyone thinks I spend my days wandering carefree through the woods checking on the flora and fauna, which does happen occasionally. But it's actually a lot of cleaning up the park bathrooms. I have seen things, cutting out crafts for the educational programs, and having to explain to the entitled why they can't let their dogs off leash in the park. Being a nanny, some parents are just horrible and merely had children as an accessory for parties and networking. Game programming. All the stress of a real programming job, with 10 times the complexity and none of the wages. There are loads of people doing it as a hobby, but to actually make money at it, specifically, to get salaried, you have to jump through more hoops than any other industry I've heard of. Alternatively, actual gameplay design. Everybody thinks they can do your job, without using math/spreadsheet/charts/etc., somehow, and nobody respects the necessity of doing it well. Every system is an uphill battle against the concept artist's cool ideas that you know will either be utterly neutered in implementation, or will completely ruin the balance/pacing of the game. It's like being an architect living in a world where nobody gives a damn whether buildings just randomly fall over or not. Special Operations Infantryman. Most of the time it's 5 to 10 minutes of extremely badass followed by hours or days of suck lol. SWAT equals sit, wait, and talk. Being a porn actor. All day, girls just bouncing on your schlong. It gets repetitive, especially when you have to do a couple takes. All day I'm just thinking about how I wanted to get home and get nagged by my wife just to feel alive again. I'd think especially for guys in straight porn, it has to be a chore. Being on call. And if some new buck starts making rounds, you just stop getting called. A fit, hung guy is not some needle in a haystack. That's why you have to start making your own shit. A scientist with just a bachelor's degree. You get poor pay, you start off with a contract to hire position, and if you're lucky you'll get hired at your job site. Even then the work environment is horrible, constantly running things or entering data. Moving up to higher positions is almost impossible due to people not leaving and there not being enough of them. Don't go into the sciences unless it's in engineering. Apparently, from what I've seen, they get the most variety of job offers and better pay. A salesperson for a mid-level regional paper company. Ballet. It's not all tutus and tiaras and galas. Think elite athletes getting minimum wage and emotionally abused. People think plumbing is all about collecting stars and rescuing the princess, but it's got way more to do with crawling around under people's homes and businesses dealing with pipes. But you do get to duck bored housewives from my extensive internet research. Oh man, I was watching this one documentary on Cinemax last night and you wouldn't believe the shit that goes down in women's prisons. Not what you asked for. But being a physical therapist is pretty great if anyone is sad and looking for a career change. The music industry. My band got a record deal in January of this year. It's not like it would have been in the 80s and 90s, pretty much constant stress of self-promoting because labels are just too lazy to plug you whilst still taking a huge cut of earnings. Making hardly any money from gigs as venues and promoters take the lion's share of the cut, and what's left is split between 5 members. Unless you're Foo Fighters or Coldplay, you're not going to make any money. I know a guy personally in a super famous band who embarks on world tours with other bands such as Killswitch Engage and BMTH, and he earns less than I do in my day job. Don't quit your day job for music. Doctor. Imagine the dealing with customers aspect of a retail job that you've spent several years of your life studying for, paying through the nose to study for, and people's lives are at stake. Video game tester. People think, get paid to play video games all day. Reality, get paid to power on off console 200 consecutive times, log results. Now change these couple options, repeat, log results. Worked with a dude who had done it. Dev procrastinated and now he's trying to finish his prop, texture, sprite or script overnight because he has to present at 8 AM. He's calling you to get out of bed at 3 AM to come in and test it for him by making this one single move 3,000 times. Diplomacy. I'm not a diplomat per se, but I worked for a while in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in my country and one of my best friends is a diplomat. Now, I'm sure if you were a frequent model UN or you dream of the lavish career of discussing at the Security Council, or traveling and living abroad, well, some people get to do that, but most diplomats get stuck in their home country indefinitely, providing support to the guys who actually go discuss at the UNSC, and God forbid they ever speak up against their government. No matter how crappy it may be, you can be sure if you speak up you might just be held back in your career, and if you ever do move to another country, well, pack your bags to be put in the most insignificant country possible. Thanks for listening to another episode of Reddit X. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any stories. Feel free to share your own stories below in the comments. Have a good day.